Hello, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Melissa Warden and I am the Student Programming Coordinator with the Goodman School of Business. I would like to begin this gathering by acknowledging the land on which Brock University was built. It's the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada's Treaty and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering places home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. Welcome, and thank you for joining us as we acknowledge and celebrate the Goodman School of Business Distinguished Leader for 2021. It is my privilege to introduce Dr. Andrew Godes, Dean of the Goodman School of Business, for a welcome from Goodman.
Thank you, Melissa. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, students. Welcome, alumni, faculty, staff, friends, and community members to our annual Distinguished Leader event. Each year, we offer you the opportunity to hear from an outstanding business and community leader. And today, our Distinguished Leader for 2021 is Margaret Kenequanash, CEO of the Wataynikaneyap Power Company. The Distinguished Leader Award recognizes individuals with outstanding leadership, business innovation, community building, and entrepreneurial achievements. It is our honor to pay tribute to Margaret today. Now, under normal circumstances, we'd be gathered together in the Goodman School of Business atrium, hosting a reception in honor of Margaret. Of course, we're still working through the COVID thing, so we are in this virtual environment, and you'll have the opportunity to hear from an inspiring leader in the business community, and how her career exemplifies the Goodman values of passion, perseverance, and professionalism. So at this time, I'd like to invite Owen Angus Yamada, one of our Goodman student ambassadors, to provide a brief introduction of Margaret.
Thank you, Dean Godes. My name is Owen. I am a student ambassador, and I'm in the Master's of Science in Management program. Yesterday, I was on campus and I was wandering around the halls of the Goodman School of Business, and I came across our Distinguished Leaders wall. As I kind of read through the names, I thought about all the wealth of knowledge and business perspectives they had and how much we can learn from them. So I'm really excited today to be here and learn from this year's Distinguished Leader, Margaret Kenequanash, a strong business innovator and community leader. For those of you who don't know, Margaret is the CEO of Wataynikaneyap Power, a licensed transmission company equally owned by 24 First Nations in partnership with Forterra Inc. It is the largest First Nations majority-owned infrastructure project in Canadian history. She served as executive director at the Shibogama First Nations Council from 2005 to 2017. She received the title of Executive of the Year at the Anishinaabe Development Fund Business Awards in 2008 and the Emile Nakogi Award for Outstanding Leadership in 2016. Margaret carries the distinction of being the first female chief in her northern home community of North Caribou Lake First Nations when she was elected in 1996. Through her leadership at Wataynikaneyap, she was able to bring together 24 First Nations and 17 communities and maintain their unity to garner government support and attract a private sector partner to connect to Ontario's transmission grid, eliminating the reliance on diesel generation. Sorry, that's my dog. Besides the obvious benefits of shutting down carbon-intensive diesel generation, Margaret believed the project could also be so much more. She believed it could stabilize the power supply and allow for economic and social development, including secure employment before and after construction, new home development, and provide capacity for clean water systems. Work continues to date with more than 590 kilometers of permitted land cleared, 1,000 foundations constructed, 700 transmission towers assembled and installed, and nearly 500 First Nations people currently working on the project. Without further ado, I'd like to give a warm welcome to our Distinguished Leader of 2021, Margaret Kenequanash, and begin the fireside chat with Dean Godes. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Owen, and welcome, Margaret. Thank you so much for giving us your time today so that we may recognize you with our 2021 Distinguished Leader.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to have been given this to be a distinguished leader for 2021. I accept this on behalf of the communities I work with, on behalf of the partners that we have, and on behalf of our team that's working very diligently on the project. Thank you for that honor.
And speaking of the project, this massive undertaking, I want to be able to get into that in some more detail. But first, I want to start with where you started in the project. You saw there was a need for a better electricity system in your community and others, and what better that better was actually possible. So I wonder, how did you know that you were the person to make this happen, and what pulled you to take this action?
So I just want to say that our First Nations have been working on energy for quite a number of years now, and before the Wataynikaneyap started, which typically the discussion started in 2007, our leaders had already identified energy as a regional issue, and they had several initiatives that they worked on to try to create a partnership and pursue what was going to be a transmission project. Unfortunately, those two initiatives never came through, and the discussion started again in 2007 when I was working at Chibougamau First Nations Council. Before I started working at Chibougamau First Nations Council, when I was a chief in my community, I also had an opportunity to know the issues that are challenging our communities when it comes to diesel generators. And we tried to work on an initiative that would allow us to connect from the Musselwhite mine to the community, but unfortunately, due to regulatory requirements and private ownership of that line, we weren't able to do that. However, we did have major challenges with our diesel generator in the community. So that was one of the roles that I had in energy at the beginning. And it's also, when I worked at Chibougamau, energy is one of the issues that we dealt with. And I've seen many challenges firsthand in terms of what diesel generators have posed on our communities in terms of housing, in terms of the different challenges that our communities face, and our community, our leadership at that time had positioned energy to be a priority, and that that we need to bring in reliable infrastructure into the communities, and so I worked on that, and I was tasked as one of the individuals, and along with my colleague Frank McKay, we worked with the 2 tribal councils at that time, along with 4 chiefs and the affiliate communities, we call them. The infrastructure or the industry that was involved initially was Musselwhite Mine Gold Corp, where they were also having challenges with the line that the private line is connected to what they call E1C line going from Pickle Lake to Red Lake, and they had a lot of power outages. But our leaders, being visionaries and knowing that they've been working on energy for a long time, indicated that this is bigger than the 4 communities and the 2 tribal councils working on this project. It requires a lot more discussion amongst our communities to bring this reliable energy into the area, and I think that's how the need and the vision has come about, and the need for quality of life and all those things that we keep talking about in this project. So when I take a look at this, and what pulled me to take action on this is, one, it was part of my job, but as well I understood the challenges that without long-term infrastructure and reliable infrastructure in the area, it would be very difficult for our communities to look at other opportunities, never mind other opportunities, but even just to improve the quality of life in the community, to provide safe water, shelter, and food, because the number of outages that we have, those get compromised very easily. And I often think about our children, our grandchildren, and also the elderly people in the community when things go, when energy gets, they have lots of power outages in the middle of winter. There's so many challenges out there. And so the driver in terms of why I do this is because of the need as well as the vision. And I'll get into the vision later on in the questions.
Okay. And, speaking of questions, I want to make sure that our viewers are reminded that you have an opportunity to have questions as well. So if you're thinking about anything that you'd like to ask, by all means, please put it in the chat area and we'll do our best to be able to address them later on in this hour. But thinking about the diesel generation, I want to talk about that for a moment, if we could. Of course, the environmental impact of this change in power supplies is huge for the communities. When everything is finished, it'll shut down carbon diesel generation in 17 communities. So that's a massive change to the impact on the environment. What are your hopes in having this project serve as a model, not only for future First Nation utility projects, but also to show how we can successfully partner with First Nations on infrastructure projects in the future?
So I think one of the things that I often talk about in the partnership is sorry, I'm a little bit lost here. So from the environment, you're talking about the environment?
Yeah, I was just wondering, with the diesel generation, the change from going from diesel to electricity, just the amount of diesel fuel that's not going to be expended and burned into the air.
Yes. So I think in terms of how does this do the environment? I mean, there's a lot of one thing that I've been working on is first of all the driving need for this project is the needs of the communities and the challenges that we face in the communities, and those challenges, could be from compromising current infrastructure such as sewer and water, and unable to connect housing, lack of services, exacerbate health issues, conditions. But we're also looking at changes into the climate change and how transporting fuel on land and water will have a huge impact on the environment. And so that's the need in itself, is the immediate. Our people cannot pursue socio-economic opportunities in business development because they're restricted with the capacity of diesel in the community. As well, in terms of, part of this project is the vision of how are we going to create our destiny as Indigenous people. I believe in the vision of our people, and it's been supported by our partners, FortisSync, who is our partnership in the transmission company. This is a precedent-setting project, and it'll change the landscape of how we do business, and we got to think about the future, not only today. We got to think about our children, grandchildren. What are we going to leave behind? It's not only our Indigenous people, it's everybody that we need to think about, and we can't think just about tomorrow. Like I often tell people, don't think just, don't just think about things up to where your nose is, you got to think beyond that. You got to think like 20 years from now, you got to think 40 years from now, because we have to be able to leave something for the next generation. So we got to become visionaries. And I think it's very important that, that in terms of how we're going to be able to do it. And providing a clean environment is one way of doing that, and making sure that making sure that we're leaving behind those things, not only the benefits from this project, but also the land that we live in, the sacred responsibilities that we have to the water, the animals, all those things. I just wanted to say that it's very important that that we maintain that for a very long time.
And you mentioned that this is precedent setting, and it's a very important point to make here, because to understand the scale of this project, when it's completed, Wataynikaneyap Power will be the largest majority-owned First Nations infrastructure project in the history of our country. That's a legacy of the project that will be a practical one for First Nations. It's a business that provides reliable electricity as well as social and economic development opportunities for future generations, just like you mentioned. So that's a massive, massive undertaking and responsibility. Has there ever been a point where you felt overwhelmed by the scale of this and the weight of it all and uniting all these communities together for this common goal?
Well, when we started this project, there's a lot of people that told me that it's never going to happen. There's a lot of people that, there's quite a few people, industry people specifically, that told me that I'm crazy. And that this is never gonna happen. And that was more like a boost of a challenge for me to go out and make it happen. And yes, we've had very many challenging times in this project. But you know what? I often say that our people know what they want. And as long as we live by those expectations as set out by our people and ensure that we are communicating with the people, staying in touch with the leadership, with the proper engagement. And that's what we had to do. It took a long time to bring the leadership together, to come into partnership and work with them to understand the need for this project, as well as understand the highly complex regulatory system that energy is in Ontario, and to be able to make an informed decision that, is this what we want, and is this how we're going to move forward? And so bringing in reliable infrastructure that provides for long-term solutions rather than band-aid solutions is something that we needed to look at. And even though it was very overwhelming at times and challenging at times, I look at the challenges that our communities are facing today, even today as we speak, and some of the traumatic experiences that our people have in the community. I think about the children, I think about the elders, and those situations that are caused because they don't have proper infrastructure. For instance, sometimes when I was working at Chibougamau, a couple of my team members and I went to one of the community to assess the current housing situation. And we found out that 42 families needed a home. 42 young families needed a home. Yet the community could not build houses. And even if they built houses, they were unable to connect those houses. So that's the kind of challenges that we see in the communities. One time I went to Pakanchikam and we saw some situations there too, where there's a lot of power outage, and this one counselor told me that we have a power outage, but we also have an individual who's on oxygen, and he gets compromised, like the health issues get exacerbated because of the situation. So those kind of situations, yes, it's overwhelming from that perspective, and the need probably outweighs the challenges of trying to bring the project together by the leadership, and also, the support that we had to garner from the government. That was the easy part in my view, because you just have to kind of educate people, talk to people, understand the need, and then pull it all together. Whereas the existing challenges, if we were to stay with diesel generators, it's worse off than the challenges that looking at the scale of the project. And so I would I think I continue to with the help of our partners, of course, and enabling that vision of our people to ownership as well is so important. Ensuring that our people have meaningful participation involvement in the project, because that's part of one of the visions that our people have, is to create that capacity in the community by way of employment training, business opportunities. And we also have current challenges. Like, we've never ever envisioned that COVID would happen. I remember when we were negotiating a contract, they were talking about the force majeure clause. And of course, I'm always asking questions. And I said, well, what is this force majeure clause? What do you do when it happens? And they're like, you know what? We never usually use that clause. You know, it's just something that we put in there just in case, kind of thing. And lo and behold, 6 months later, after we signed the contract, we had force majeure. So there are a number of other, you know, the fire situation was another challenge that we have to face summer. And so, yes, sometimes it feels a little bit overwhelming, but I think the needs and the challenges of our people and the vision of what we're trying to achieve outweighs that outcome, and hopefully for the better in the future.
And you know, you think here, there's a key word that can be applied in many different ways, and that word is power. So power is key here for electricity, of course, but it's also in what you're saying, there's a power of autonomy of the 20 First Nations communities, their spaces. Have you thought about this connection, and what does that mean to you to be able to create that environment of self-sufficiency for so many, knowing that that means and what that means to them as well?
Well, I think from where I'm sitting, you know, I believe that this energy development is precedent setting and bringing reliable energy. It's a huge step forward for the quality of life in the communities. And it's not a band-aid solution, like I said earlier. And it does have all sorts of, it's multifaceted in terms of how we're working on this project by way of, it's not just bringing a line into the community. It's not just lighting up the community. It's about how are we going to secure those opportunities? How are we going to enable employment training? How are we going to ensure partnership and ownership, as well as what are some of those future initiatives that could be pursued in making sure that we're in the future, and what is that foundation that we're setting for our children and grandchildren. So it's there's a lot of positives in my view by bringing in reliable long-term infrastructure into the community. It's precedent setting because of the you know, how we achieve the overall vision amongst our Indigenous people is it changed the way that we do business, as well as, you know, we live our purpose according to our Creator's plan, and a willingness to work with one another, with governments, industry, and our people through respect and recognition. And those are some of the kind of things that that I think about when I think about this project. It's quite a number of communities that own Wataynikaneyap. Ownership is a major aspect of this project as well, by creating long-term benefits. 24 First Nations working together to own a major infrastructure that's coming into their homeland, and then providing those benefits from a long-term perspective as well, immediately, in terms of how are we meeting those meaningful participation involvement directives that we've received from our leadership by way of employment training and business opportunities.
And thinking about the business opportunity, and we've got the 24 communities coming together, but of course you're going to have to partner with a utility power company, basically, to make this happen. But not only that, you need a utility partner who'd be willing to take a minority share in the project. and ideally eventually hand everything over to the community. So how was that experience getting to the point of finding that right partner, knowing that you are partnered with Ontario? How has that experience been in bringing together those two worlds to work in harmony with the Indigenous principles?
Well, when we first talked about this project, there was a lot of work that we've done in developing that partnership. We had to do like a market sounding study at the beginning of the project, just to see if there was any interest from the utilities and transmission companies, and as well, you know, how was the government going to respond to this? So we did that initially, and then as we got into discussions about, okay, how do we move forward, is starting to look at what we call the pre-development partnership. And the pre-development partnership was a consortium of I think 4 or 5 entities of groups, and that did not work very well. And then as we developed, we set out a process of what is the expectation from the regulatory regime in terms of being a transmission company. And we took a look at that and found out that a transmission company requires money, they require license, they require the technical expertise and knowledge to build, maintain, and operate. So that was within the regulatory and legal parameters of building a transmission company. What they did not have is First Nation partnership. So we sought out across Canada with 7 major utility transmission companies and talked to them about what their thoughts are about First Nation partnership and the thought of having a partner the First Nations who would have major ownership in the project rather than in the project. So majority ownership is what our First Nations, that's the premise of the part. When our leadership got together, initially the 13 First Nations, they said that they would pursue this project as long as ownership was part of it. And when we went out and sought these things, that's what we talked to the major transmission companies across Canada, 7 of them. So some of them came and said, that's a really great idea, but we can come and do it for you and we'll hand it back when we're done. Or some said, well, we could do 80-20. Others said, absolutely not, we'll build it for you. And, there's just different initiatives, but we found our partner. We found our partner who was willing to work with us to enable the vision of our people in terms of the partnership, and that's Fortis Inc. and other private investors. And Fortis Inc. is a wholly subsidiary of Fortis Ontario. It has a total assets of approximately 53 billion and 10 utility operations, and they come in and talk to us that they would be willing to partner with our First Nations, and that they're also willing to enable the vision of majority ownership of the project. And from there, we started talking about the various, things that we need to look at as partners in terms of what is it that needed to be done in the partnership. And it was about how are we going to enable the two to work together. So it takes a lot of work to make sure that we have a successful transmission development. It has to be an agreement or a working relationship between First Nations, industry, and government, as well as a willingness to work with one another, recognition and respect, and what is the true meaning of that partnership. And we brought strengths together to achieve the business outcomes. We supported each other's aspirations, and we had to learn and appreciate our differences and to continue to work together. We have to blend our skills over long term, our First Nations guiding principles, our culture, our language. We are teaching our partners about all of that. As well, they are teaching us their expertise in utility operations, project development, and we then become two experts to make it happen with the vision that's been, directed to us and the mandate given to us by our First Nations. So each of us, we look at what is the partnership goals. From the First Nations, we serve our communities and improve the living standards as well as the future generations, the visions, the capacity and business opportunities. And Fortis, obviously, growth and business development and serving communities and partnering with First Nations. So all of that put together, and I always say that if you're going to become a partner with whomever you're going to become a partner with, always have to recognize that you agree to disagree at times. It's not always hunky-dory. And don't walk away from each other if there's a misunderstanding, because you'll never get to a point where you know about your partner or where your partner knows about you. I found that we did a lot of educating, with the business, with the industry, as well as with the governments about the needs of our people, about the challenges of our people, as well as, they taught us from a business perspective and a regulatory and legal perspective what those expectations are and how we transmit that to our First Nations to make informed decisions were some of the challenges that we had, but we did it. And the partnership happened. And then we got into the contractual negotiations with the person who's gonna, build the line, all those things that we're working on. Yeah, I'm really, really grateful that we have a partner who supports the vision of our people, enables the vision of our people, and not only that, reinforces the cultural aspect of our people and reinforcing that within the company that we're establishing.
This is a great opportunity to open the floor to the questions coming in from the viewers, because the first one that's in front of me is the CEO of Fortis Ontario, Scott Hawkes, who's also a member of our Dean's Advisory Council. And so much of what you've responded to is the response to the question he has here, but there's an opportunity for maybe a few seconds to add to it. But he mentions, congratulations, Margaret. You are an accomplished leader and have achieved many milestones on this project. He's asking, can you describe the importance of partnering with an industry leader like Fortis on a project of this scale? And I think you've done some of that, but what we can do is maybe focus it a bit more is, how has it been working with Scott Hawkes and his team on advancing this project? Because he introduced me to you back in 2018, and when you came to the campus, we had a great conversation, and it was a great opportunity to meet you then and know full well that great things were going to happen under your leadership. So it's wonderful to be able to have you here today and to see Scott in the Q&A. And here's an opportunity to maybe round it out a little bit.
Well, like I say, I mean, it took a while to the selecting a partner. That process alone, I think, was about 2 years. Just determining who our partner is going to be, and because our leadership had specific directives in terms of how they wanted that partnership is a key and the premise of how this project was going to work. Our leaders also had set what we call guiding principles that set out expectations of how our project is going to move forward. So in doing so, we have to work with our partners to create that level of understanding in terms of the needs of the communities, what those expectations are, and how are we changing together the elements of the kind of regular business as usual to ensure those expectations are met, and changing the landscape of how we do business with our partners. And we're also teaching them about our culture, about our language, because we involve them in the cross-cultural training as well.
Mhm.
And support that that they provide to enabling the vision of our people is very key to the success of this project as well. And also continue work with us on these things. So we have a governance, a board, that two from the First Nation side and two from the Fortis side that sit as a board, who are my bosses, and they tell me what to do. And but at the same time, we have also the shareholders, the 24 First Nations and Fortis shareholders, that we have to make sure that we're also accountable to, and making sure that this project is successful.
How do you go about educating people working on a project like this about cultural, like how do you elevate cultural awareness in a project like this and bringing people together?
So we have a team that we've established through Upagabowin Services, and Upagabowin Services is a First Nation organization set up by our First Nations. They own it 100%. They have specific responsibilities to work with the project manager, who is also Fortis, in delivering to make sure that the project is done according to the mandate that have been given to us by the leadership. And one of the things that we talk about is our protocols and our principles, because the guiding principles set those, setting out expectations, respecting for our people, the land, the environment, the water, all those things that we talk about. And how are we going to make sure that this is resonating also amongst the contractor and the subcontractors, and not only that, our partners, to understand what that means to the land user on the land, in their homeland. There's going to be a right of way coming in, and what do we do to respect that individual, and how are we going to make sure that the information is provided appropriately, the community is provided that necessary information, all those things. And so we've been working really hard to do that, and making sure that we carry those out accordingly.
Thinking about the number of firsts that are happening here, and the advances that you're making in precedent setting, I have a question here from a member of our faculty, Teresa Menzies, who's a professor in entrepreneurship within our school. She asked a question about you yourself being a woman in this position. So do you see yourself as a beacon for young women to follow your example of leadership?
I would hope that that I could provide some information and knowledge to people, younger women, to take up challenges and make change for our people, or for anything that we do in life, and how we influence that change, and how we communicate and how we interact with people. And over time in my life, in the work that I do, I have learned a lot in terms of how I respond to questions, in terms of how I do things, when to become assertive as well. I told the student body this morning that, always ask a question if you don't know. There's nothing wrong with asking a question. As well, you don't just get smart all on your own. I didn't. I learned from a lot of people. I learned from my parents, who set a really high benchmark for us children when we were younger, in terms of what we need to do to follow through on the 7 grandfather teachings, in terms of humility, in terms of compassion, love for our people, and how we work with our people. Patience is not my forte, believe me. I only learned only learn as I'm going along, and I've also had past leaders, that have mentored me, that have taught me. I've had a lot of elders that have worked with me, and I encourage people to surround themselves with people that are very knowledgeable. You need to relish that knowledge. You need to expand on that knowledge with your own knowledge base. And so, yes, as a young woman, I started out, I was a very shy person, if you can believe it. I was a very shy person. Through my experiences personally and through my work, I've mustered enough courage to be able to speak for our people and advocate for our people the way that I do today.
So thinking about your leadership style then, Margaret, if you could share, if you think about the Indigenous principles that are at the forefront of this project, how do they tie into your leadership style?
Well, when I learned business about leadership styles, they have these like 4 kind of charts about different passive and the different kind of leadership, but which is quite different from when you talk about leadership with our people. And my father also taught me that leadership is not something that you just get, that you need to earn that leadership. And if you can meet certain qualities as a leader, then you can become a leader, is what he told me. And some of those teachings that he gave me, even today I look at it and I feel that maybe I still have a long way to go to learn about these things as a leader. And so there's, in terms of the style of how we do business in the work that I do, I find that in how we communicate is so important, in how we interact with people, how we engage with people, how we inform people, to keep people together, to make sure that they understand. At the same time, listening is one of the things that is very important, to have a true understanding of what that expectation is. And sometimes listening, sometimes we want to go and say, okay, here's how it's going to be and here's how it's going to be done. A lot of times that really, offends people, and it's better that we sit down, try to understand the situation. And I've learned this over time. I mean, I'll go in a community and say, oh no, you should do it this way and this way and this way. But as a young woman, I used to be like, want to take the bull by the horn and go for it, right? But I've learned over time not to get mellow and passive, no. But, I've learned over time that, yeah, listening is a skill that needs to be had as well, and making sure, and how we act on it. And I think trust is a big word in our world, because of the relationship that we need to build, and how we are able to achieve those outcomes that we want to set, and becoming visionaries into the future. And that's kind of like what I see as leadership. I often think that leadership is also how we serve our communities, and being able to act on some of those things that the various directives have been given to us. How are we resonating those and the actions that we take on a daily basis in the project, for instance? It's something very important.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. If you want to continue on that point, I thought.
It's okay.
Okay, I was curious because you mentioned about your father and about leadership and about taking the bull by the horns, and you built patience. And so through all this time, I'm thinking of a question here that I'm reading it actually from Teresa. She says, she asks, if you think of your family, who is or was the most influential person in your earlier years?
Both my parents. From my parents is my dad was a very patient man, And my mom was a go-getter. She meant business, that one. If something had to be done, it had to be done. So I got both of their qualities, maybe not the patient side so much, but, but you know, and they taught me a lot. So I always talk about my parents because they're the ones that molded me to be what I am today. And hopefully I can live up to the benchmarks that they've established for us.
You know, let's take this to the reality of what you've been able to do, the practical application. And I remember this news item, the video. So this goes back to 2018 in December. The community of Kenequanash was connected to the main electricity grid in December of that year, 2018. And so for the first time in 10 years, families were actually able to turn on Christmas lights from a safe and reliable source of energy as opposed to diesel power. So what was that like to hit a touchstone after years of working and building towards it, to actually seeing a community being able to turn on lights, which is, you know, the line that is what the translation is for Wataynikaneyap Power. So it means the line that brings light. So here we have in December 2018, the line brings lights to Christmas trees. What was that like for you?
I think as we do this project, it's been like taking baby steps all the way through. And I think it was very amazing and rewarding to work with the elders in that community, because they too had a vision. They too have worked very hard in terms of what they wanted from their community for energy as well, and also their land initiatives that they're working on. So I wanted to acknowledge the elders, because if it wasn't for the elders in that community to say, let's do this, let's work in partnership with Wataynikaneyap, but we also have to address our need, which was in dire strait. You know, to me, it was a major accomplishment, you know, to be able to provide reliable energy to the community that was in dire straits. And, you know, we had a very short timeline where we had to live up to the commitments that we made to bring energy to the community. So seeing the children and the elders that were part of the celebration was very rewarding. And I look forward to our next communities as we hook them up next year and moving forward and to completion.
Thinking, you mentioned the children, and for people who may not realize, Margaret met with a number of our students earlier today as part of being for the dates on Distinguished Leader for 2021. We have a question from one of our students, Manisha, who asks that this question is, you know, what message or expectations do you have from the youth or students like us, and how can we contribute to this goal?
Contribute to what? The school or the goal?
To the goal, to this goal that of creating an opportunity where we see, you know, all of what we talked about, the partnerships between Indigenous communities and business, the idea of working towards bringing opportunities to northern remote communities, shared understanding of goals and sharing of principles, and a heightened level of cultural awareness. I think if I'm reading more into Manisha's question, my hope is that I'm reading it right and expanding on it appropriately.
Well, I think the message that I would have, you know, as younger generation come up, is that we don't let history repeat itself in terms of the relationship that we have with our Indigenous people of this land. And that's a big task that our younger generation will need to take on to make those changes that are needed in how we work together as individuals. And so I would advise that, you know, you need to go out and educate yourself and understand about the people of this homeland. And from there, whatever expertise or knowledge that you have, how are you as an individual going to make that change to make sure that we are, you know, making that change to include our Indigenous culture into the various programs or companies or government, depending whatever work job we have. How are we going to make sure that happens? Because we see a lot of media out there in terms of the brokenness, the horrible history that we have on this land, and it shouldn't have been like that. And how we're going to make a change for the future, and you're all part of it. The younger generation coming up will be the ones to take hold of that and make for a better change. So initially, go out and educate yourself to understand what are our people, who are our people, what is the language, and what is that culture and the traditional teachings and ceremonies that we have. Understand those in order to be able to change that typical business culture, corporate structure that we work within right now. And that would be my advice.
Thank you for that on behalf of Anisha. I'm going to ask the last question here, if I may, and it goes to how we started this. You mentioned that some people didn't think this project could be done. It wasn't possible. Well, here we are. It's going to be completed in 2023, and they're moving along, and power is coming into communities. What does life look like for you after this project's completed in 2023?
Well, I think I as long as I'm continue to work on this project, we still have a bit of work to do after the connection, and that goes into operations. And you know, there's different things that we need to do in setting up our operations. So, and then of course, you know, there's the regulatory regime of doing the various rate applications on all those things that need to be complete. I probably would continue to look at that as long as my bosses continue to allow me to work. You know, I often tell people that you know, that there's a lot to be done out there. There's a lot to be, there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot to work on. And I often tell my children, when I grow up and I know what exactly I want to do, there's different things that I would like to do in my life. But there's different things that I could work on, different initiatives. So yeah, there's enough work out there for everyone, and there's lots of things that could be done that we could utilize the same approach that we've done within Wataynikaneyap in different initiatives that we could pursue. So there's nothing set in stone at the moment, but I still hope to work a lot of years for my people, and I will continue to work for my people.
Yeah, thank you, Margaret, for this time, having this conversation and responding to questions, not only mine, but members of our community. And I know we could go on for quite some time. This is really a very inspirational discussion. Your career is really, truly one of passion, perseverance, professionalism, which is our values at the Business School. And we are so delighted that you allow us to honor you in this way as our 2021 Distinguished Leader for the Goodman School of Business. Thank you so much for your time today.
No problem.
I want to also mention, if I can, for a moment, you are representative as a leader in 2021, being recognized and distinguished by the Goodman School. We've got a long line since 2007 in this category. And in this week, I think it's particularly important to recognize someone who was our inaugural distinguished leader, and that was Paul House, who was chairman and CEO of Tim Hortons, and he passed away earlier this week. So I wanted to take a moment to remember and honor Paul, who was a good friend of Goodman School of Business and Brock University. He served as a member of our Dean's Advisory Council from 2005 to 2016. was our inaugural Distinguished Leader, as I mentioned, in 2007. Sat on our University Board of Trustees and received an honorary degree from us in 2008. So he is remembered as a strong and effective business, having had a significant impact in our community. And I know he'd be honored and proud to know that you are representing a long line of distinguished leaders for us here in 2021. So once again, thank you so much, Margaret, for being part of this day with us and allowing us to honor you in this way.
Thank you, and I'm very honored and extremely grateful to everybody for this recognition. I really appreciate it, and I certainly will share it with our leadership, our chiefs in the communities, and our board members, as well as Watay board and our staff, the staff that we work with, along with the PM and the Wabagabwan staff. Extremely much.
Thank you. Before we end today, I would like to invite Owen to come back and share some words of closing for us.
Right.
Yeah, thank you, Dean Godez. I would like to extend a sincere thank you, Margaret, for taking the time to tell us about your leadership journey and Wataynikaneyap Power. As a student, it's so inspiring to hear from professionals like yourself and about how hard work can make a vision reality and how much of an impact our actions can have on our communities. It's also really inspiring to have our perspectives on what leadership is be broadened with you being here. This project that you're undertaking is remarkable, and so are you for taking it on. Thank you again for attending today, and I'll pass it back to Melissa to close off the event. Thank you.
Oh, you're muted, Elizabeth.
Melissa, you're muted.
You think I would know that by now. Thank you, Owen and Dean Godez. Thank you to everyone for joining us, especially Margaret. It's been an absolute privilege to hear from you today. We can all learn from the insights and knowledge that you shared today, and our students can take your words and experience with them as they move forward in their own paths. Thank you for sharing your advice, your stories, and your journey with us. On behalf of all our attendees, we thank you for your time, and thank you once again to everyone for attending, and that concludes our event for today.